Hi, I'm Roy Coughlan, and I'm the creator of the podcast. You can find everything about me and the five podcasts on bio.link/podcaster, and you'll find it in the QR code there. I'd also like to thank my sponsors. If you or someone you know is struggling with anxiety and want to know how to be 100% anxiety free in 6 weeks without therapy or drugs, Daniel Packard Anxiety Solution Program Company offers a 6 weeks system that permanently solves anxiety at an astounding 90% success rate. People who join the program only pay at the end once they have clear, measurable results. If you're interested in learning more, go to permanentanxietysolutions.com where you can book a free consultation with Daniel. Do you have high blood pressure and want to get off the meds? Doctors are amazed at what Zona Plus can do. Get a $50 discount with my code ROY. Go to zona.com/discount/ROY and you see the QR code for all my sponsors down at the end. Quality Polish manufacturer of metal products for telecommunication and workshop equipment and other metals. If you'd like a brochure, you see it in the QR code and you just let us know if you would like a quotation shipped internationally and very competitive rates. I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast.
Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. We're also on BitChute and YouTube. You'll find the links in the podcast description. I'm also a podcasting coach, and I've got 4 other podcasts. You'll find everything on bio.link/podcaster. My guest today is actually in beautiful Toronto, Canada, storytelling coach, speaking coach, and a writer. Please welcome Erin Rodgers.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. And also, friend for podcasts. Good for you.
Yeah.
What do you do? Like at the end of the day, do you just you're upright? You're so busy. You're just I'm just going to plug into the wall. That is a lot of stuff.
I actually love it. It's 5 total, including me, and I love it.
5
to be honest,
yes, of course.
Yeah, I get so much energy from it, and just meeting people like yourself and having lovely conversations. It's I recommend everybody to actually start podcasting.
Honestly, it is. I'm also a very busy person, and I'm of the opinion if you get to do what you love, that's the thing about being busy. I'm being busy doing amazing things. Also, you can tell I'm in the arts and not in math because I couldn't count to 5. I will be honest with you, and this is a thing as a storyteller, I'll probably tell a few little anecdotes. I was put in business math in high school where we had textbooks that were 20 years old, and one of the my fellow students set his desk on fire. So let's just say it wasn't math for people who were really going places with math.
Yeah, but I mean, listen, I was in school and I was put into an Irish and English class that was kind of like the worst of the worst, and they tend to do the wrong thing when they should be helping us. But look, it is what it is.
Right. So it's one of my passions in the work that I do is that, listen, my parents are both teachers. I have a great respect for teachers. But the amount of ways society does not do people right, including my father was a teacher and they were not great to him in school. He was told at one point to join the world of work, which is a great euphemism for get the heck out of this school. But it's and I feel like you probably feel this as well. One of the things about doing the kind of stuff that we do is you can find these other elements that you were probably had some kind of message that you were wrong about. There's these parts of you that are different. One of the things I love about stories is you just watch someone come alive in a way that's so magical. It's like seeing a movie, but it's right there in front of you. So it is, I describe myself a few different ways. One, I am an enthusiasm enthusiast. I love creativity. I love people trying something different. I'm very enthusiastic when I meet people. A friend of mine said, you can tell when you've been in a party before me because everyone starts talking about the book they're going to write and all that kind of stuff, because I love that. And also on a selfish note, I want to read all those books. I want to watch all those shows. I want to, all that stuff. But my job, other than being a professional weirdo, is to help people find and share their stories to connect with people. So whether I'm going into a company and teaching them how to use stories to talk to their clients and get information across, to like work with shareholders, that sort of thing, or I'm helping someone work on a story they're going to tell in front of the audience of a storytelling show, or do a like a keynote in front of thousands of people. It's all about communication and connection. And as someone who has a major history with anxiety and mental health fun, I also really pride myself on finding the way that it'll work for the individual. Because especially when I was at my worst, like at one point I had to literally push myself out of the door of my apartment because everything felt so overwhelming. There is an apartment, and I apologize to that landlord, where there are literal fingernail scratches of me having to push myself out every day, and it's like, you know, waves on a rock. Eventually it'll turn into sand. But I would get tips like, well, just do it. I'm like, oh, well, that's helpful, that's cool, thank you for that. Or you know, well, I picture everyone in the audience naked, and I was like, I don't want to go, that feels unfair to them to decide that I'm going to so all of those things weren't working for me. And so I really love finding the thing that's going to work for that individual, because we're all different and we all have something to share. But if it is going to be an unpleasant or scary or whatever experience in a way that'll stop you from bringing yourself in the way you want to, well, that's only half of the job I've done. If I've helped you find your story, but we haven't figured out a way for you to communicate that story in a way that's going to feel as comfortable for you as possible, then like I've gotten 50%. And as someone who was desperate to get an A in school, didn't get them very often, but was desperate to get an A in school, 50% is not enough for me.
So how, I mean, I had anxiety as well, hated, you know, public speaking. How, because obviously I think you can serve people a lot better when you've been in there. Because some people, they're like, even from people that's been on my shows, like from 5, I knew I wanted to be a public speaker. I did acting, and they just had no fear ever. But then there's like us that just like, I mean, I think my claw marks are on the lectern where I did my first speech. Like,
could you imagine if that lectern just happens to also be owned by that same landlord? That same landlord's like, why does this keep happening? Or maybe they're just really into claw marks, so they're happy as a clam. But yes, there are people where that's their story, where they're like, I was 5, I knew I wanted to do this. You know, it's always been great, it's always been exciting, and that's great. Like that's like the fantasy football league of, I don't know if they have that in Ireland. Do people do fantasy football leagues? Yeah, or like fantasy like footy leagues. But it is like that's great and exciting, and like tell me how your brain works. But I think for a lot of us it's some sort of spectrum of anxiety, because you know this, it's one of people's greatest fears. There's people who are like, I would punch a shark in the nose before, because you know they say, well, it's like that's how you get rid of, you punch a shark in the nose. And I don't know who has a shark coming at them and they're like, I know, I'll just punch him in the nose. Like I'm like, I'm just,
that's the one-handed people walking around the place.
There you go. But that one arm is like real victory because they punched that shark. But I honestly, if a shark was coming to me, I'd be like, you win. Like, congratulations, shark. Good job. This is my last moment. Hope I lived it well. Anyways, that aside, if it's unclear, I do have ADHD. So when I do speaking engagements, it's all prepared. When I'm talking this way, sometimes I might talk about punching a shark in the nose. But anyways, most of us are not punching a shark in the nose people. Because especially almost everyone in my experience has had someone say something that lives in the back of your brain. And when you're trying to speak in front of people or whatever, that voice gets louder and louder and louder and louder. And you can know intellectually that that person is not accurate, or times have changed or whatever. the amount of things in my mind where I'm like, I don't even like that person. And somehow their judgment of me has this power where it's like, it's good they think that about me. I don't want them to like me. They're not a good person. But also it is like, it's like a ghost, like, woo. And that's the thing is when I know people, like, I'm so glad for people where everything's just gone really well, but knowing that people have a difficult time, knowing you're a person who's a podcast coach and has like a baker's dozen of podcasts and has that anxiety, I was like, oh my god, I could do it. If he could do it, I could do it. This is great.
No, exactly. And I'm just curious because from myself and talking to a load of people that have been on the show, we've traced it back that a lot of it is caused by the teachers or just the school environment, because they're going around the class and you panic. I mean, I remember my brain used to switch off when there were about 5 people away from me, and it was like I used to just panic, and then you start stuttering and everything, and then the class is laughing at you, or the teacher starts giving out you because you're saying numbers backwards and things like that, and then you just, that's, as you say, it goes to the back of your head, and it seems like everybody's got an experience like that.
Yeah. And I think part of the thing is, and I don't know the fix for it, is because teachers are people. Like, wow, what a revelation. But everyone has had a bad day and made like a mean joke or whatever. And later you feel bad about it. But with children, they're like little baby brains are figuring stuff out. And also, like, you're the expert, you're the teacher, etc., etc. You have this power over their life. And also there's people that are teachers that just shouldn't be teachers. There's people that are teachers where it's like, did you become a teacher because you actively hate children? And you're like, oh, get them all. They're all in one spot. But it is, most teachers are just people doing their best, low budgets, etc. And also, I'm going to be very vulnerable with you. I was an annoying child. Like, I was, especially when I have ADHD. I am autistic. I do the wrong thing sometimes. And when there was no idea of that, when I was a kid, first of all, they thought ADHD was only for boys, that it went away. There was all these things that people didn't know about. So I think there were a lot of people, because it just seemed like I was doing it on purpose, that were like, this kid, let's just make her stop, instead of, why is she doing this? Because the system isn't set up, at least it wasn't here, to be the best for kids. It was just like, it was basically like, just get this, shovel this information into them. And I had wonderful teachers. Like, I'm a queer kid. Definitely some of my best friends were teachers. I had that art teacher. I had asked just about honestly any creative kid, but especially a queer kid, a queer adult, and they have a teacher that like changed their life and let them know things were going to be okay. But also the system is just like, okay, you have more kids and there's more information and you've got to get it into them as soon as possible. So I think sometimes if there's a disruption, it's like, well, my job is to do this. This is an obstacle. I do not have time to sit down and figure out what's going on with this kid. So you just do what you have to do.
And the other thing is, like, I think some of them, well, I don't know what it's like in America, but usually in Ireland, it was a case of they had a job for life. And I think maybe perhaps they were excited for the first 10 years, but then the children probably sucked the energy out of them. And it was they were just chugging through life and they didn't really want to be there. And you could feel it as a child.
Yeah, there are definitely people. It's so funny. So when I went to university, I went to U of T, which is very funny. They call it the Harvard of Canada, and let me tell you, it is not, because I got in, and I would not have gone into Harvard. But there were people there, and U of T will tell you, and if the university is listening, sorry, you're a great school, but you're pretty high on your own fumes. That they're the best school, etc. But there were professors there that actively hated every person there. They're like, I have to deal with you. And these are people that, yes, they definitely are guaranteed a job and they're making like really good money. And they're just like, I have to teach. Yuck. So it is like, it's one of the reasons, you know, I'm very much a like, we need to change the system. But there's so many things where it's just like, there's vulnerable people, and they're having to, like, learning is a vulnerable thing. You're having to, and like when you're a kid, I don't think it feels the same way, but you're going to a place where you don't know something, and people hate to admit they don't know something, and there is a person who is going to give you that information, and they have all the control and you don't. So like, it's just so tricky.
And I think like a lot of people kind of use it like a babysitting service, and they just, off you go, and they don't even check what's going on. Parents have to take full responsibility, you know, and know what is going on in the child's life, what they've discussed, and realize when there's an issue to nip it in the bud at the start, rather than the child having, you know, a problem in their teenage years.
Yeah. I also, and this is one of the reasons that I love what I do, is the thing is there are other ways to support people and kids and whatever. Because I think part of the thing that helps me turn that volume knob down, because those mean things are always going to be there. And let's be honest, there is at least one person walking around in the world, and I hope it's only one, who I have said something to, and that lives in their brain. I have said something mean, or I have said something I don't know is mean, or whatever, because we're all human and we're all flawed, and sometimes, and we're all the villain in someone's story. But with vulnerable emotional work, the volume turns down. When I'm in a storytelling show and I hear someone be vulnerable and admit to their flaws and talk about what makes them happy and what makes them cry, and like things they've learned in the world, I know that I'm okay in a way that I hadn't before. I don't want to brag, but I've done like a lot of therapy, like a lot. You know, do you have like, you know, you used to have like sub cards, and if you got enough stamps, then you get a free sub. I would probably get several submarine sandwiches, based on the amount of therapy I've had. But it amazes me how much sharing stories has been a tool for turning the volume down with those things. And I think it's also one of the reasons why I think both people want to work with both of us, is it's just like, oh, this is a regular person like me who has their ups and downs, who's not perfect, who is figuring it out. And I think that is one of the problems with the way education is there is the idea of there's this perfect person who's an educator, or there's this terrible person that there's an educator. There's not really a space for people to be flawed and complicated and a bunch of different things. And it's the same with kids. It's like people are like, oh, I love kids, they're magical angels, or I hate kids, they're monsters and they ruin every time I'm on a plane. And it's like, no, they're just people.
No, yeah, exactly. Well said, well said. So I know you're helping people kind of bring the funny in their storytelling.
Yes.
So you might let us know how you do that, because I know some people really struggle with trying to have humor in a speech, and I think it's probably most of the speeches that I've done always kind of include humor. I prefer that. Like, I love seeing the audience laugh and the energy you get from it. But trying to teach that, then how do you actually navigate that?
Well, I will say that one of the biggest tips that I have for people is humor is a tool to help people listen to you. So you don't have to have, like, people don't have to be coming up to you and being like, like, you know, it's not I can't think of it's not a Chris Rock concert, especially not a Chris Rock concert for me. You know, people coming up to me and like saying my catchphrase. It's giving them a space to breathe, because especially for someone with ADHD, I can only concentrate for such an amount of time. So if you're giving me a bunch of information, or it is a difficult experience that you're telling me, if it goes, my brain is going to get tired, and I want to listen. I want to listen so badly. But if you give me those breathing breaks, then I can stay with you and I'm happier. And also I like to laugh. I mean, who doesn't? But you don't actually have to be hilarious. A dad joke will do great. People will be like, "Wah ha 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 ha." It's being your type of funny. So for me, one of the best ways to be funny is your point of view in the world. So when I work with clients, I often ask them to get more specific and to find out what the details are to your point of view, and how you see the world, because that is often where the funny is. So for example, this is if you are telling a story and you're talking about I was having some fries, excuse me, and then I got some ketchup. If you say Heinz ketchup, you'd say the specificity, you'll be surprised how often people like perk up and sometimes laugh with just a specificity. Also, and this is a cheap trick, but listen, both the band and the thing, I love cheap trick. So here is a cheap trick for you. If you're talking about the past, references to the past, specific references, often get a laugh from people, especially if they're of the same age as you or older. Now, if you're like me, 42, and there's a bunch of 20-year-olds, they might just stare at you because they are not gifted with the same knowledge of Cheap Trick as I am. They're a great band. Anyways, but something along the lines of, I did a story recently and I was talking about the 90s, and it was, I know two things that I hate this book that I'm reading, and that Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake will be together forever. Now, that is, we know now, of course, they are not. So it is funny. Any kind of thing where it is you have a very strong belief that we know now is not correct, that is not a hateful belief, will almost always get a laugh, because that is the very, very strong belief that goes wrong is just a funny thing. If you believe so strongly in something and it's not real, that passion is just funny, because we all relate to it. We've all been like, oh yes, Cheap Trick is the greatest band of all time. Like, they can't be the greatest band of all time. There's many bands. There's a whole world of bands. But if I am so passionate about something and am proven wrong, yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I will say there's a lot of bands. I want to be very Canadian. Bare Naked Ladies are the best band of all time. They're probably Canada's most popular band. Bare Naked Ladies, greatest band of all time. If I really commit to that, people will be like, well, that's not possible. Well, they can't be the greatest band of all time. Also, just a lot of laugh is them being on your side. So if you bring enthusiasm, if you bring a character to things, that will also, it doesn't always have to be a ha 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 laugh. Like, a laugh of recognition is very powerful. An I'm on your side laugh is very powerful. But a lot of it is bringing yourself and being vulnerable. And what I would love to do for your readers is I'm going to give a little free worksheet, pardon me, of some little tips you can use to find your funny right at the top while you're putting things together.
Okay, excellent. And like, when, say, somebody is preparing, it's good when you know the audience, because as you mentioned, the age group, and you're not going to throw something, if you're kind of 40s and it's a young crowd. But when you don't know, what's the best way? Do you just kind of err on caution, or do you try to incorporate a few kind of generations that you're touching on both sides of the fence?
I will say you can never go wrong with making fun of yourself. You're not going to hurt anyone's feelings making fun of yourself. I will say, if you're talking about something that other people might share, like, say, fat phobia is the thing that is around everywhere, and so making like insults about your body, maybe not the greatest, but you can always make fun of yourself. And also, people love a dad joke. It is one of those things, especially if you're talking about something difficult. If you can put one in there somewhere, people love that relief, and it is suddenly you are getting huge laughs for something that in a different context wouldn't. But I would say no matter what, you can always safely make fun of yourself.
Okay, excellent. And I know that you did some solo shows. I think it was Tough, was it the name of it? It was called
yes.
Tough. So I'm just curious how long it was for and how did you navigate through that?
Well, I am a big fan of stand-up and comedy and one-person shows. And so I had an experience of a summer where I tried to be a tough person because I'm like a little squishy marshmallow of a human being. And as I was going through it, people kept saying, like, because I never think what I'm doing is weird. I also think a thing from comedy is like, I always think what I'm doing completely makes sense. And then other people will go, huh? And so also if when you're telling someone something, they go, huh, you're probably onto something funny. But people kept being like, what is this? Tell me more. And so I started to realize it was an experience and it was a solo show. And I got a little bit away from the actual experience. So I looked at, the writing I had done at the time and started figuring out what I learned and how I changed. Now, when I did the solo show, it didn't end with really what I have learned is the following, because in my experience, that's when people start to roll their eyes because they can figure out what they're taking out of it. I don't have to tell them. They're very smart people. They will figure it all out. But it was, to me, one of the most important things with figuring out a solo show is having a little bit of distance from the material. And so I had enough space to figure out why I was doing these things, because there were certain things in my life that I had no idea, pardon me, I had no idea why I was doing it, but it was happening in my life. And it was a matter of finding what the structure was that worked and finding the beginning, middle, and end, and then just having a lot of fun and seeing what worked and trying it out on different stages. So it was taking some parts that might have seemed disparate at first and seeing the connections from them that created an arc.
Okay, excellent. So I know you do workshops, and
I do.
I'd love to know how you structure your workshops with your personality type and, energetic and just, so you obviously put your take on how people can learn better. So I'd love to know what way you're structuring it and how you're connecting with the people going to the workshops.
Well, I sort of reverse engineer it. What I want to do is, what are the things that I would like people to come out of the workshop with? So I'm teaching an intro to storytelling workshop in a few weeks. And there are some things I'd like to have people come out of it with. Like, I want them to have the basics so they can start finding and writing their stories and sharing them right away. One of my big goals in life is to encourage people and get them telling stories because I want to hear those stories. So let's say we're doing a business storytelling workshop. I will talk to the client and be like, what are the problems that you need me to solve? This is very embarrassing, and I don't usually say this publicly, but I say in my mind, I have what I call the Vanilla Ice method, where it's like, you have a problem, I'll solve it. Check out the beat while the DJ revolves it. Ice, ice, baby. So like, I'm autistic. What is the problem and how can we find the solution? And what are the exercises that will help? And if I can, in the same way where you were talking about know your audience, I like to find out what the style is of the learners who are taking the workshop. How do they feel most comfortable? Because there's different methods of learning. And also my like super high energy is not for everyone. So if there's someone where it's like they're going to feel on the spot, I always let everyone know before a workshop and the day of. If you do not want to, I will not call on you. If I'm looking around, just don't make eye contact, and I will know that means not to call on you, because that is my also like school thing where it is, the teacher's like, who's not listening? I'm going to call on them. We don't have to. This is a place where we're having fun. Like, I'm not going to embarrass you in front of people. So to me, the most important thing with workshops is what is going to be the most helpful for the people in that room. What are the problems that we're going to solve?
Excellent. So you're the co-founder of Pathfinder Collective. What's that about?
Mm-hmm. So the Pathfinders Collective is a collective of 3 of us, and we put out storytelling collections. So the idea is, especially to encourage people who maybe haven't done this before, or who have and have fallen off of it, and also amazing storytellers that I've met who are incredible and I've seen on different stages. But the idea is to have different people, like, I'm sorry, Roy, you are going to get an email after this being like, hey, want to do a story in our next collection, and giving you the information about it. But it is, we have a theme, you tell a true story on that theme. And then for people who are accepted into the collection, one of the members will work with you on your story, ask you some questions, we'll have a coaching session, and then there's back and forth on it. So the idea is to feature and highlight different storytellers, especially people who maybe haven't been featured in the same way, because there's so many creative people who heard the wrong message and have given up. And it's not there. I'm not of the like, well, you just have to keep going no matter what, and like, it doesn't matter what anyone else says. Cool, sure. And if that works for you, bless. I am proud of you. You are one of the people that knew what they wanted to do at 5, and everything worked out well. But for a lot of us, you get the wrong message and it's easy to give up, because if you're creative, you're sensitive. I have a friend who was at one point, he managed a bunch of rappers, and he was saying that there would be a time where one of them would like get their feelings hurt in a way, and they wouldn't know what to do about it, because they were very, very sensitive people, and because they're artists, and people would expect, because a lot of what the artists he was talking about, it's like their raps were all, God, I'm the whitest person in the world, but their art was all about being strong. It's almost like a fantasy of you like, you're very, very strong. That was the style of rapper that he was with at the time, but they're very emotional and sensitive people. And so it is, someone says the wrong thing and they will shut down, and then they have a hard time creating. So that was what I had been lucky enough to find this online world, especially in the early days of lockdown, for I was about to say SARS. Oh my goodness, that's a blast from the past. From the Why can't I think of the name of it? Oh my goodness, this is why I edit. From COVID. And I had met all these amazing people, and from all over the world. I could, go and hear a show from India. I could hear a show from the States. I could hear one from down the street. And so I realized there was all these people where, wouldn't it be great if there was a book? Because for some peers of mine, it was like, well, they can't come to this show, but if I had a book of them, they could read them whenever. And so I reached out to someone I met at a show, and was just like, basically like, hey, want to be friends and do this really intense project with me? And he agreed. And we put together this collection that we were and are so proud of. His name is Jeremy Credlow, wonderful guy, fantastic storyteller, fantastic writer. And then one of the people in the first collection joined us, Kurt Mullen, also fantastic guy, fantastic writer, etc. And we all the money from the collections goes to charity, and we have a space where it's a bunch of different types of writers from all over the place. We do have an Irish writer this time. Their name is AJ, and that story touched my heart, and I've actually gotten a lot of feedback from people about how that story made them feel, because it is about depression and finding this moment where things are going to be okay, even though it doesn't solve everything. And I think that's often not talked about in mental health circles. It's not that you're just better, it's that you're going to be okay is one of the most important moments. That, like, even though it's going to get tough again, it might get tough in 5 minutes, you know that you're going to be able to get through it.
Beautiful. And with because I know you do some webinars as well, and I know that, like, some people, they're trying to create courses or whatever they're doing, but webinars is kind of an important part. So what have you kind of learned the more you've done? What kind of tips could you give people with the webinars?
Yes. Well, I think the thing with webinars and doing anything on the web is that you do lose something because you don't have the same you're not in the same space. So you can't get the feeling of the room in the same way. So I will say get to it quicker would be one of the things, because also you're dealing with, there's someone has a baby crying, or there's a dog walking in, or all that kind of stuff. You don't have complete control of the space and people's attention. And also, don't read out your slides. Don't just be like, hello, my name is Erin, and click. We are going to be talking, because I've gone to those webinars.
There's a lot of people doing that, and it's like you just cringe because, one, if you're reading it yourself, you're 10 times faster.
Exactly. I will say some of my biggest tips are tell people you'll give them the slides later, because then they're going to be listening to you and not reading the slide because they know. And also send it, because I've had people say they'll send the slides and they don't, and then I'm stressed. Tell them that. Don't read your slides, and think about what you want in a webinar. That sounds really obvious, but people forget that. Watch some webinars. What works and what doesn't. I was watching the David Sedaris masterclass recently, which was a real pleasure. And he was talking about, he does readings all the time and goes to readings because you learn so much from that. What have people done that you like and don't like? He talked about this, and I say this, and like, I have really wonderful poet friends. My friend Lisa Shen is a brilliant poet. I love poetry. But he was saying he's gone to readings, and someone was like, this is, the first of 11 poems. And then you're in a countdown where you're like counting every poem. And I've had that experience. And so don't make it like it's going to be a difficult thing for people. You want it to be fun. They're giving you their time, even if it's for work. Even if work was like, you have to be there, Roy, you've got to be there, or you do not get paid. Let's make it as fun as possible, because when people are having fun, they learn more. If someone's like, here are a few things, blah, unless you're, I don't know, a big fan of horror movies, you're probably not going to connect to it. So give them what you would like to experience, and have a little bit of fun with it, and watch other people. There's a lot of stuff that's online, and see what you like and don't like. Take some notes, and also make it as clear as possible. In the same way with when I'm doing a workshop in public, what are the problems? It's, same ice baby. What's the problem, and how can I solve it? And it's the same with webinars. When one of the problems is that someone, their dog might walk through and they might be distracted. What are things that you can do to stop that from happening? Maybe, change the tone of your voice so you keep getting their attention, and also keep things as short as possible, which is very funny because I just said so many things. But if it was a webinar, I would have been quicker.
And with the different speaking that you've done over the years, equipment, because I hear different people, I'd love to know, kind of, is there any things that went wrong that with knowledge you could prevent it from happening?
Oh, this is a great question. Yes, so many things. One, make sure that you don't have like a green screen that's not carefully put up, because then it can fall and clatter, and that is not fun. Basically, to me, the thing is, if you can, try things out with a friend first, because you can try to troubleshoot those things. Don't get brand new equipment and not try it first. If you have a friend who is good at tech, including, in my case, sometimes my 2-year-old niece is better at me than me at tech, get that person to give you a hand. And also, I will say Google is your friend. Google to see, because if there's a problem that's happened, someone has found it before you. But to me, like anything else, practice. is the best thing. But yes, I have had my internet go off because the power went out. Things happen, but as much as you can, prepare and try things out, because you're also, if you're like me, you're going to be anxious on the day of, so things can suddenly feel really overwhelming. So if you practice, I also do a thing. This is the one way I'm like an athlete, where I picture everything. I go through it in my mind as well, and like what will make me feel the most comfortable. So if tech goes wrong, I know to do a deep breath and say something, maybe make a little joke, be like, oh, sorry, that was the wizard. There's like this wizard who controls my computer, and I guess I got the wizard mad. Like, make a little joke, because if people know you're okay, they won't stress. If they feel like, oh no, there's, because people, as much as people like, there's a lot of like, people are terrible. People aren't. There are people who are actively terrible, but most people want other people to succeed, and they feel good. They want you to do well. And so if tech's going badly and you seem to be spiraling out, they're going to get anxious on your behalf. Even if they don't like you, it's like they catch the anxiety. So I would say, yeah, have a plan for if things go wrong, and like make a little depreciating joke, and you'll be surprised how well things will go.
Oh, excellent. I have 2 internet providers just as a backup, and it still can go wrong. And I was doing a few years ago a Toastmaster competition. I got into the, I don't know, 3rd round or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was there for like the 6 hours or whatever it was. And the one time that my computer, the thing just crashed, was halfway through my speech.
Of course.
It was like,
Roy, were you mean to the wizard? That's the thing, is like, there might be a wizard. Who knows? Like, they call Apple geniuses. It could be other computer wizards. Who knows? But yeah, I do storytelling, and of course, but sometimes I do a little bit of stand-up, often to like try out stuff that I will put in the work I'm doing. I am far from a stand-up. I love stand-up, but that is not my way of doing things. But it is a great way to try out different things that I can use. And I was on a Zoom show, and someone was doing their joke, and it was just before the punchline, and their computer froze, and it did that Zoom freeze where it was just like, ah! And I felt very badly for the person, because one, it's too bad they worked on their joke, they had their joke, but it was also the funniest face, and they didn't get to experience us all just rolling on the ground laughing.
Yeah, that's one that should be recorded, and then you get to save that.
I hope they did. I hope they got to see it, because it was I don't even know, like, my thought was, it's like, that should be a still, the like Andy Warhol, like the different images in different colors. I was like, that should be that stand-ups thing. It should be their album cover, it should be t-shirts, whatever. It was truly one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
So finally, with the social media, because I mean, you're doing few things, and what you find serves you, because there's so many platforms out there.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm still figuring that out. To me, I think for storytelling, Instagram is really helpful. I've done different things where I do a story every day. I did a Billy Joel, 30 days of Billy Joel when I was turning 40. I did 30 days of stories inspired by the titles of Billy Joel songs, because in case you were wondering if I am very cool, I love Billy Joel. And it sounds like I'm being sarcastic, which I am a bit, but also, I'm sorry, people love Billy Joel. He's very famous for a reason. He's a wonderful artist. But anyways, and that was a really great experience for me. But I think one of the things is with this stuff is, you don't know. You can keep track of the numbers and that sort of stuff, but you don't know the times where people get to know you as a person, and that helps them hire you, or start to follow you or etc. So I like to think of it as I'm just putting things out there and people will see it or don't. With Twitter, I'm more jokes. With Instagram, I'm more here are stories, here are quotes that might help you. Here's information about my show. So I think a lot of it is like, what do you feel most comfortable with? Are you a person who loves doing, I don't know, memes? Or do you have a lot of Despicable Me, the little minion memes? Then maybe that's Facebook. And are you a person where you want to talk to people like in your own voice? Literally, Instagram, you could do video stuff. And you do shorter ones than YouTube. And you can also, as you can have something on Twitter and then do it in a different way on Instagram and etc. Which can also get exhausting because you're trying to cover everything. I would say I primarily do Twitter and Instagram because, as you might have been able to figure out, I love to chat. So Twitter, I get to talk, and Instagram, I also love images and sharing little bits of stories in my own voice. So those are the two ones that made most sense to me.
Brilliant. And I know that sometimes if I'm sharing a joke and it's relevant to the podcast, I give the details of the podcast because I know people will share the joke, and you just don't know. Somebody out there gets to see the podcast that would never have heard about me, and then they start following it, and at least you're sharing a bit of laughter around the world. Worst case scenario, like.
Exactly. And I also think this is a thing, and I don't know if you have this experience, especially because I was like a bit of an obnoxious punk kid, which is very funny because I was so anxious. So it's like I didn't have like cool hair or whatever. I made zines that I did not distribute. Were zines a thing in Ireland where people did their own like little like photocopied, like interviews with whatever local band and like it basically was like the internet before the internet.
Maybe I didn't do it, but
yeah, fair. So I would make those kind of things and not distribute them. They're probably in a box in my parents' basement somewhere. Sorry, mom and dad. So I had this idea of like, I'm outside of corporate, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not going to sell out and all that sort of thing. And so it was a lot of times when I was starting out, I was like, well, I don't want to tag this. I don't want it to seem tacky. And that's the thing is like, if people have heard a joke of yours, they're probably going to be like, oh, I like this Roy. So funny. And it's like, wouldn't it be nice if they got to find out more about you? Because they already like you. They heard a joke, they're in. People want to have more joy. What you're doing is helping them find more of something they're enjoying. And if they don't like it, they can just scroll on by. But if I saw one page of an amazing book, like there's a writer I love, Josh Gondelman, hilarious. And I discovered him on Twitter. And if he had never advertised about his book, like I Googled him, but not everyone's going to do that. But, like I wouldn't have got this book. I've bought that book for so many people. A friend of mine was going through a difficult time. I sent her that book and she was like, I really needed that laugh. And what if, Josh Gondelman advertised by like tearing one page out of his book and putting it on the side of the road? And like, there's no way to connect with him at all. Myself, I wouldn't have got it. All these people that it's brought joy to wouldn't have got it. So that's what I think of. It's like, I want people, if you don't like me, that's fine. But if you want to have more of me, I want to make it easy for you. And I would also love to there's this thing that I do now, and tell myself that's been really helpful. And I think it really connects to what we were talking about earlier, especially if you were ever a kid that was bullied. And like, who was it? There's got to be like one kid somewhere, his name is Phil, and he was never bullied. He was just a nice person his whole life. And everyone was like, Phil, like they put him on their shoulders and they're like, Phil, 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 Phil. Like that's his story. I don't know him. Good for you, Phil. But most of us have had some crappy experiences. And so it is easy to not want to put yourself out there because especially that part of your like baby brain is still there. And so it's like, that's too scary. And what I say to myself now is, I am an entertainer. I enjoy entertaining people. If you making fun of me entertains you, mission accomplished. So if someone sees a link and they're like, oh, gross, I hate this woman, then they get to feel good. They get that like dopamine rush of like not liking me. That's great. I brought them a little joy. That's wonderful. So I'm going to put that link in there so they can just be like, gross, scroll.
Brilliant. Well, I know that you have entertained the listeners today, so you might let people know how they can find you.
Yes, I'm going to bring that up. Another thing that I have learned is always make sure you have your socials in front of you. So on Instagram, I am Erin, ERIN _Rodgers, RODGERS _Story Pro. So it's Erin Rodgers Story Pro. On Twitter, I'm Erin M. Rodgers. And you can find my website at storystarcoaching.com. That's storystarcoaching.com. The last one is for if you heard me talk about the Pathfinders Collective and you're like, I sure would love to get published. It's pathfinderscollective.org. Pathfinderscollective.org. I want to hear your story. Please get in touch. We have a new collection. We'll be announcing the theme before too long, and I would love to hear your story.
Excellent. I'll make sure I'll put the links both in the audio and the video. Thank you very much for a beautiful conversation.
Thank you. This has been such a pleasure.
Thanks. So that's all for the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. As mentioned, we're on BitChute and YouTube, and you'll find my other podcasts, 5 of them, nearly half a dozen, as Erin said, and my coaching on bio.link/podcaster. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, share with your friends, and be sure to check out Erin's website. Until next week, take care.
So I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. You'll find everything about me on bio.link/podcaster with all my podcasts, and you'll find it, you see in the QR code in the graphic that's shown. I'd like again to thank my sponsors. So if you or someone you know struggling with anxiety and want to know how to be 100% anxiety-free in 6 weeks without therapy or drugs, Daniel Packard's Anxiety Solution Program company offers a 6-week system that permanently solves anxiety at an astounding 90% success rate. People who join the program only pay at the end once they have clear, measurable results. If you're interested in learning more, go to permanentanxietysolutions.com, where you can book a free consultation with Daniel. Do you fight blood pressure and or want to get off the meds? Doctors are amazed at what Zona Plus can do. You can get a $50 discount with my code ROY, zona.com/discount/ROY, and you'll see it in the QR code as well as Daniel's QR code. Quality manufacturer of metal products for telecommunication and workshop equipment and other metal materials. You see the brochure there in the QR code, and let me know if you would like a quotation, shipped internationally at very competitive price. I'd like to thank all my sponsors and also all my listeners. Be sure to give me a thumbs up, 5-star rating, share with your friends, really helps. And I also have a video on how to give a 5-star rating, because a lot of people have wrote to me asking me that they don't know how to do that. Until next week, take care.